And you've got, I mean, I was trying to come up with a genre to put it in, and I thought, well, it's a reimagining of something. So in some ways it's fiction, but it's also got a large number of footnotes. So it's academic. So, where do you place it on the spectrum of literature available?
In a funny way, it's like a biography. It's a literary biography. It is nonfiction. So my own speculation isn't actually in the book, but the speculation of others is
But
in
you're
the
creating
book.
the scenes, though.
I do, okay.
Right.
So I create
So
the
there's
scenes.
some.
That's true. I try and make it come alive for my reader, and I try and make it read like a novel. I do. But I don't actually make anything up. So what I do is I tell the story, and then I pause here and there, and I say, this is an interesting part of the story. What do Jews make of this? What do Christians make of this? What do Muslims make of this? And then I go back to the story. So I try and keep it moving along, but I also think as I'm telling the story, and I want my reader to think also, because of course, one of the things that I have found, problematic, I think, about the book's reception in the world is, well, first of all, this is my first time ever getting hate mail, which I think is really, it's a unique experience. And I've been getting hate mail from a certain kind of Christian, actually, who is a very precise reader. People who like the book are always kind of vague. They just write me and say, hey, I really liked the book. But I've noticed that my critics write me emails that go something like this. Page 133, chapter 22, you are a heretic. And I, think, do I want to read this email or don't I want to read this email? They're so specific. So I never intended this book to be a Christian book, a Jewish book, or a Muslim book. I really saw this book as an opportunity for the three traditions to examine the story that we all have in common. And so it's a book for non-believers, it's a book for believers, it's really a book for people to understand our cultural legacy. What is this story that, for better or worse, has shaped people's actions and is one of the driving forces for Iraq and now Afghanistan? And in fact, in Israel today, if you were to interview one of the settlers, you would hear them cite this story as the reason why they should, get to be in the settlements. And if you talk to a Palestinian, they too will cite this story. So this story has amazing implications for today. And again, it's probably because I'm an intellectual, but my hope is that if people actually knew the story and could retell the story in a different way, in a way that has biblical basis, there actually might be more hope, because the Bible at no point says that Ishmael, the Muslim, should be disenfranchised. No, 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 God says Ishmael is blessed. God gives a double blessing to Isaac and to Ishmael. And so there is not actually biblical basis. If you're going to be somebody who lives, with the Bible as a kind of blueprint, the Bible does not give any excuse for the kind of violence and warfare that we have seen.
Now, you said you had also done research into not just the Christian Bible, but you're doing it from both sides with also the other two religions. You had talked about some of the differences that you found. Do you find that played out? You said that it seems to be a mostly the hate mail comes from a particular kind of Christian reader. So that hasn't happened on the other sides. Like you don't get fundamentalists from either of the other.
I don't. In fact, so far the people who've been most enthusiastic about the book have been Muslims, and that probably means the most to me, because that was the tradition I worked hardest on understanding. I consulted so many different people and so much literature just to get a sort of sense of this story from the Muslim perspective. And so I was thrilled that I'm getting that reception.
Okay. What, when the venues that you're going to, you're a guest at the Jewish Book Fair, what are those receptions like when people talk to you about the book? Are they always, as you say, sort of vague about why they like it, or do they sometimes say, this was a story that I had long clung to sort of as an individualistic idea, but thank you for bringing it forward in that way?
This is one of my favorite things to do, is to go talk to religious organizations. So I've talked a lot to Unitarians, Episcopalians, Protestants, sort of the liberal Protestants, and I've talked to Reform Jews and conservative Jews as well. And what often happens for people in religious traditions is that this is a story that they too have struggled with. And for the last talk I gave to a Jewish community, a couple of the women came up afterwards and said, "Thank you so much for writing this book, because we've always struggled with the story of Sarah pushing the second wife out." And my explanation, they said, which I loved, my explanation really helped them redeem Sarah and understand Sarah's behavior more. So I was really glad to hear that.
And the explanation is that it's a cultural thing at the time?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I'll see if I can do the short version of it. But the first time we hear Abraham speak in the Bible, he's actually talking to Sarah, and they're about to enter Egypt. And he says to Sarah, "Sarah," he says, "I see you are a beautiful woman. Could you please lie to the Egyptians and tell them that you are my sister and not my wife, so that they will not kill me on your sake," because he knew that they were going to want her for the Pharaoh's harem. So she doesn't say anything, but in fact she does make it into the Pharaoh's harem. The Pharaoh wants her. She's so gorgeous, and the early Jewish commentators, by the way, are practically R-rated in their descriptions of how gorgeous she was. You know, her thighs, her everything. So she's in the harem, and again, the Bible is a little iffy about what happens there, which is interesting, but how close do she and the Pharaoh get to, you know, intimacy? But ultimately God rescues her from the Pharaoh's clutches, and she and Abraham go back into the promised land. And then years pass, and there's no exchange between husband and wife that we hear of. So the reader's left with this sort of sense of unresolved stuff, like how come Abraham never says he's sorry, and how come Sarah never gets mad at him? That never gets resolved for us, the reader. And then Sarah speaks for the first time in the Bible, and it's about 13 years later, and Abraham's just come back from war. And instead of saying, "Hi, honey, you know, I'm so glad you're back from war," she says, "Here, take my maid, Hagar, and sleep with her, and see if we can have a baby through Hagar, because I can't have a baby, and we can adopt that baby for our own." And I've always thought, what a strange way to greet your husband after you haven't seen him for so long. And why? I mean, we know Sarah can't have a baby, and we know she is thinking, well, maybe I can have a baby through my maid, but still it seems like a strange, perhaps hostile way to greet one's husband.